All right, my name's Monica. I'm the marketing director here at Viscosity North America. If you're not familiar with Viscosity, I'll tell you a little bit about us in a second, but hopefully you're familiar with our entire panel today. These folks are great industry friends of ours, as well as people we really look up to within the Oracle technology realm. Today, we've got Maria Colgan from Oracle. She's a distinguished product manager. Charles Kim, Oracle ACE Director and President here at Viscosity. Troy Ligon, Oracle ACE Pro and Director of Enterprise Architecture at Incom Payments. Rich Niemiec, Oracle ACE Director and Chief Innovation Officer here at Viscosity. And Sean Stacey from Oracle, and he's the Director of Product Management. Be sure to check them out online. You'll get the slide deck with all of that information as well. This webinar we do every year when there's a new release or a beta release of Oracle Database, and we have Oracle user groups across the US help us spread the word and sponsor us. So I'm super thankful for these user groups that are helping us out this time around. All right, so with that, I think we're ready to go. I'm going to turn this over to Maria from Oracle, and she's going to kick us off.
Thanks so much, Monica. So yeah, what we're going to talk about today is what you can expect from 23C. I will have to show you the safe harbor statement only because some of what we're going to cover is not available just yet. Yay. All right. So as I said, we have a quick look at the safe harbor statement only because some of what we're going to cover today is not yet released, and we'll let you know which bits are and which bits aren't as we go through. So what is 23C? As I said, it's the latest version of the Oracle database. It had an internal project name of App Simple, and that's because along with the 300 new features we had an emphasis on making things easier for developers to build and run any kind of application at any scale. And of course, we were also going to be incorporating AI into this release, and we'll let you know where that is as we go through the presentation. But along with all of those ease of use features, we did, of course, continue to enhance our leading scalability, availability, security, and analytics. And you'll see some of that as we go through the presentation. Now, 23C 23.3 is available both in the public cloud and on-prem if you use our Oracle database free, but it will be coming everywhere. 23.4 will be coming everywhere later this year, so keep an eye on that. So where does 23C fall into our release timelines? Well, 19C is our current long-term support release. That's going to be supported all the way through until 2027, but 23C is the next long-term support release. So if you're taking a more conservative approach to your Oracle database release strategy, 19C, you'll probably then jump straight to 23C. And as I said, you've got some time to do that, but 23C is the next long-term support release, and it will be supported all the way through 2031 and perhaps even beyond.
If the remote click-through is taking too long, I can go ahead and click for you.
Do you mind? Sorry.
Yes, not at all. Well, no, I can't click through.
It doesn't want to cooperate.
Have we broken it, Monica? Yeah. I've broken it.
And just to let everybody know, we practiced this and it worked perfectly.
I know this is
Now we have
we
of course have a lot of people here now.
As Dom would say, you know, it's a live demonstration or presentation.
Yep. Okay, bear with me. Something stuck. I'm going to stop sharing this for a second.
So while Monica gets us back the slides, let me give you some of the background. So Oracle Database 23C, as I said, it's the latest version of our Converged database. And if you're not familiar with that term Converged, really what we're talking about is complete support for all the different data types, different workloads, and different development models. And traditionally, what we would say is, using the Oracle Converged database, you can add a SQL statement instead of a new database if you want to take advantage of additional data types or support different workloads. And although that's true, there were a couple of situations where you might have needed to trade off that convenience by deploying a different data base or a different platform to support something. And in 23C, we wanted to get rid of all of those trade-offs. We wanted to revolutionize the integration or the unification we had for all of the different data models at a very fundamental level so that we could remove any of those trade-offs. And we've done that in 3 key areas. The first area that we really wanted to focus on was the unification of JSON and relational data. We also, though, wanted to give you all of the simplicity of power of graph on top of relational data, and of course, the unification of AI and databases. So I'm going to hand you over now to Sean Stacey, who's going to give us more insight into what we've done to unify JSON and relational.
And I was going to say a question was, does 20 certify with EBS and R12.2?
So excellent question on certification. That is in the works right now. So stay tuned. Normally that happens after we've done the full rollout across all the platforms. But as a long-term support release, yes.
So hey everyone. So really quickly, what we're doing with Oracle in 23C for JSON is we've introduced a key feature around JSON relational duality views. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but in essence, what we're doing is we're able to transpose relational or table data as a JSON document. Now, if anyone on this call has used JSON in the past, we've been able to do this for quite some time. We've been able to render the contents of a table in a JSON document, and vice versa, render a JSON document that could be potentially stored in the database as a document, as a table. And that was done using JSON Data Guide. Most recently, though, with JSON duality views, think of it as being an object relational style mapping where we're able to take multiple tables or the contents of multiple tables and assemble a uniform document for you. And we're not only able to present that information and that hierarchical relationship between those individual tables, if you wish, we're able to aggregate that and show that to you as a single document, but we're also able to allow you to make updates to that document and for the document or for the Oracle database to seamlessly update the underlying table objects that they're mapped to. If you don't, actually, before you move on, Monica, one quick comment here. We can see that we have a student table, a course table, student courses and teachers defined as tables, and we can see that information as various sub-elements within that document. And Monica, if you could move on to the next slide, please. Creating a JSON duality view is very straightforward, as you can see. We've borrowed some syntax from the GraphQL feature that I'll be talking about next. But what we're doing here is we're creating something called a student schedule, and we're mapping the underlying components of that student schedule. So the student schedule here is for a student named Jill, and you can see the contents on the right with respect to the individual columns that are being mapped to the underlying tables. And Monica, if you can hit the next slide, it's a build for us. We can see here that we've got the first table, student, mapped as the first entity, if you wish, where we're grabbing the student ID, the student name, their major, and then their courses. Now, if you recall from the previous slide, you may recall that the student courses has a mapping of courses and teachers that are assigned to each one of those students. So in this case, we can see that we have the course information for the time, the course name, etc. But more importantly, we can see that the teacher is actually sitting in its own table. Now, you'll notice that for the teacher, we're using an @unnest. And what we're doing there is we're actually translating or transforming the contents of the teacher table to appear as an entry inside the course document. So you don't have to keep navigating down through the JSON document. Everything appears at the same level. And if you look at the various columns that we're mapping here, we're reassigning the student ID to be called student, the S name column to be the name, the major and the year as well. And Monica, if you can hit the build on that as well. So we're able to transpose or to map what would have been a relational mapping or identifier for that column name to be a more generic document name that maps to our application. Now, in addition to that, we're also able to get back to what Maria was saying about making it extremely easy and to remove those barriers from using other models or methods to get to your data. We support REST APIs, and here's an example of us being able to get that student schedule for that student. And you can see we're following the dollar equality for the filter by or query by example that you would use in a REST call to grab the data. Not only can we query the data using REST, we can also update the data using a put call in this particular instance. So that document, when you update the elements of that document, the Oracle database will transparently push that information into the Oracle database for you. Now, one thing that I kind of overlooked or dismissed in the previous slide is the fact that not only do we allow you to make those updates through SQL, we can also do those updates through the MongoDB API, as well as through this REST API that we can see. So it's possible for developers to update through Python or through curl or other mechanisms to update that data. And it's also possible to update that information through the Oracle database directly itself. So the next topic I'm going to talk about is in relation to property graphs and graphs in general. So property graph views in Oracle Database 23c is a completely new feature. However, I do want to point out that Oracle has supported graphs within the database for a very long time, since Oracle 10G, and that was really as it related to using Spark and ontologies and textual style searches. With 19C, we moved into, in fact, it was 12C, we moved into a property graph model where we could support PGQL visualizations to access and to visualize data that's defined as we can see A, B, G, for example, are nodes or vertices in the graph, and we can see the edges as the dollar amounts that are operations or transactions that are taking place between these nodes and vertices. And with 23C, we can natively support that visualization. So prior to 23C, you would use PGQL using a third-party tool or visualization engine to transpose that property graph information and to visualize it. With 23C, we can now perform that natively. So just as we're able to provide the object relational mapping for your JSON documents, where we can map a table to be part of a document, we can also provide mapping in Oracle 23C for property graphs. So in this case, we're mapping our bank accounts as being the nodes or the vertices, if you wish, that make up our graph visualization. And in addition to providing or displaying or to transform, if you wish, the table to be a node or a vertice, we can also represent the edges between those nodes or vertices we can map that to a table as well. And in this case, we can see our money transfers, which has our bank accounts listed as from and to with a dollar amount, can be very easily mapped to our vertices, our edges, I should say. So in this case, we can see an example of creating our property graph, and we're creating our property graph called bank graph. And you can see it's fairly straightforward, where we're defining the vertices or vertex tables, in this case, the bank accounts, and we're naming them accounts. We're also naming our edge tables, which are the tables that define those edges or those connections between those vertices. And we can see the properties for our bank accounts, so the ID or bank account equivalent, and we can also see the balance. In the bank transfers or the edges, we can see our source and destination key with the properties of the amount and the to account. It's also important that when we map the source key and the destination key in this particular instance, we're mapping the from account, which is showing us the reference back to the bank account table, along with the to account. So we're seeing both the source and the recipient of the transaction or the money transfer. And here we can see a property graph operation. And this is where Oracle has innovated in 23C. We're actually the first commercial relational database to support this new ISO or ANSI standard to support SQL PGQ. And SQL PGQ, as you can see here, is a way of blending both the SQL or SQL language along with property graph-like syntax. So here we're selecting our path between our graph table, and we can see the bank graph that we're doing the mapping for. And we can see that we've got a match taking place. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but we have a match taking place for bank transfers between, we're looking for links between, for single links with up to 3 hops. And we're looking for where that's happening between vertice B and vertice E. So if you wish, the edge is the bank transfer, and we're looking for a path of up to 3 hops, commencing 1 to 3 between those 2 individual nodes. And if you were to look at the next set of code, thank you, Monica, you read my mind. In this case, we can see we can do the same operation using a relational query, but in this case, we've got 12 joins and 3 unions to handle all those intermediate accounts. In the case of the SQL PGQ version, we simply change that number 1 to 3 for the number of hops that we wish to increase it by. In the case of the relational query, we'd have to write a whole bunch more code to show that next hop of queries that we would be looking for those intersections or those transactions between node B or vertice B and vertice E. I believe that's it for my session, and I'll hand it back to Maria.
Thanks, Sean. So I'm going to take a look now at how we're adding AI to the Oracle database. So with AI, Monica, if we can go forward. Yep. We're going to introduce a new type of data or a new data representation that are called vectors. And those vectors are going to represent the semantic content of things like images, documents, and videos. So what exactly is it? Well, it's basically a sequence of numbers where each number, which is called a dimension, but each number is going to represent an important feature about that unstructured data. So let's take a quick look at an example. Here what we have is we have an image of a house, and if I was building the vector for that image, it may contain dimensions for things like what type of roof does the house have, what decorations does it have, how many stories are in that house, and what is it built with. And like I said, each of those dimensions represents a different feature of the house. Now, when it comes to building vectors, it's not quite as simple as I've led you to believe here. In fact, these vectors are built or determined by machine learning algorithms, and they typically have hundreds, if not thousands, of different dimensions. But for us, just to keep it simple, we'll just look at smaller vectors like this. Now, why do we store these vectors? Well, what's important is allowing us to do semantic searches on this and find similar items. So this is how it's going to work. If we were to collapse down the vectors for houses to just 2 dimensions and we put them on the graph, it would look like this. And if we look at the next slide, you'll see why it's important. The houses that look similar or have similar attributes will be closer together on that graph, while the houses that are very different will be further away. So by calculating the distance between those points on the graph, we can find items that are very similar, they'll be clustered together, versus doing a comparison, for example, of the house there on the right-hand side of the graph. You'll see it's not very similar to the other 2. And we'll see the same is true if I was to do this for documents. So for example, all of the vectors that represent animals, they're closer together on the graph versus fruits or even states. And even within that cluster of vectors for animals, you'll notice there that lion, cat, and kitten are closer to one another than dog, wolf, or puppy. You may be thinking, well, that's great, Maria, but I thought, how do these vectors go with AI? And if we look at the next slide, I'll let you know what's going on. So before I do, sorry, let me quickly just say, in case you're wondering why we're talking all about these vectors, well, of course, it's because we've added vector support in 23C into the Oracle database, allowing you to do both business searches as you would normally do, but also vector AI searches on top of unstructured data, allowing you to use both to answer your business questions. But as I said, this is AI vector search, not a GenAI as we know it. So how does this all fit in? So let's take a look at how we can store the vectors inside in the Oracle database. So you'll see a new vector data type. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a table called houses for sale. And in the house for sale table, I have a lot of relational information, things like the house ID, the price, where it's located. But along with all of that, I'm storing a picture of the house and a vector for each of those houses. And if we look at the next slide, you'll be able to see how I can do those comparison searches. So if I upload a picture of a house and I say, I want to find houses that are similar to the one in the picture, I can do that very simply inside in the Oracle database. The uploaded picture is turned into the input vector. And then I simply use a new built-in function called vector distance to be able to compare that input vector to the existing house vectors inside my house for sale. Now you'll notice there that it's not in the where clause predicate, that the vector distance function is going to be used in the order by clause. So new vector distance function that you use in the order by clause will find you all the houses that are similar to that photo that we uploaded. Now, no expertise required. And what's even nicer is that I can combine that vector distance query with relational queries as well. So in other words, if I want to find all the houses that are similar to the picture, but also fall within my preferred city and within my budget, then I can simply add additional relational where clause predicates to that vector distance query and be able to get a single integrated solution, giving you all the benefits of AI vector search. But as I said, where does all this fit in with AI? And where it comes really important is that vector databases are going to be able to augment generative AI. Most generative AI algorithms have been trained on public data, what data is available on the internet today. Most of us don't want to share our business critical data that's private within our own Oracle databases, and vector databases and vector support inside the Oracle database are going to allow you to augment those public generative AI algorithms by retrieving detail and awful private data inside in your database and sending that just to the generative AI algorithms to help answer that particular question. We're not giving them your private data to help them train their models and then make it available to everybody. You only send that additional data to augment the information being sent to generative AI to help answer those questions. And we call this RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation. And let me show you a very quick example of how that works before I hand you over to Troy. So here's how it would work. The whole point of AI is to allow us to ask natural language questions. So your user would ask their question with natural language. We would then take that question encoded into a vector and send that to the vector database, who would then do the comparison search and find documents or information inside in the database that closely matches that user's question. That private or context-specific information would then be sent along with the question to GenAI, who would then use both of them to come up with an informed answer that can be returned to the user. So RAG is really the big use case for storing these new vectors inside in the Oracle database. Now with that, I'd like to hand it over to Troy, who I believe is going to talk to us about multi-tenant and some of the other cool new features.
Thank you, Maria. Yes, Oracle has a lot of tools in their arsenal that support high availability and minimal downtime. And being in the financial services business, a lot of these tools are really near and dear to my heart, not to mention vital to my customer satisfaction on all of my users. So I use a lot of them. New for 23C, I'm going to talk about several components, but I'm going to start here with one of the more simple ones to use. That's their per PDB standby. So with 23C, of course, everyone must now move to container databases. So we've had CDB, PDB for a while now, but many folks have resisted that move. One reason is that it's a licensed product as multi-tenant option. It means that costs money. Well, to help ease this, new with 23, you can have up to 3 PDBs in each CDB for free. And that's free as in beer. Everybody likes free, right? So this is great news because once you've moved to a multi-tenant configuration, it opens up a whole array of new capabilities. One of those capabilities that Oracle added new for 23 is the one that I see is very useful, per PDB active data guard. In the past, if you wanted to use data guard on a multi-tenant database, you had to do it at the CDB level. that meant all of the PDBs had to fail over together. In this example, I have 3 PDBs in each. If I were doing it in the old way, I'd have to bring all of the PDBs from CDBA over to CDBB in one swoop. Now with 23, you can manage it at each PDB. So in my example here, I'm showing PDB 1A is a primary in CDBA with a standby PDB 1B in CDBB. At the same time, I've got PDB 2B is a primary in CDBB and a standby in PDB 2A that's over in CDBA. So you can have them going both ways. All your primaries or all your standbys don't have to be in the same CDB. Also put 3A and 3B out there just to demonstrate that all of the PDBs in those CDBs don't have to be data guarded either. So these are just 2 primaries there by themselves. I'm giving you a couple of the commands. They're managed with Data Guard Broker. Fairly straightforward commands here, and you can see all the way to the bottom. The switchover command is really straightforward. You just tell it to switch over the pluggable database. This one PDB1B at CDBB, and it'll switch it over. So the next one that I want to talk about is what I'm calling truly rolling patches. Still on the high availability theme. Patching is the #1 cause of scheduled outages today if you survey all of the IT folks out there. So to help address this, 23C provides several improvements in this space. I'm calling them truly rolling patches. I don't think that's an official name, but I'm calling that as the group of several different enhancements we've made for rolling. I'll hit just the high points of a few of these. You can check out the Oracle blogs from Roy Schwanger, Mike Dietrich for all the latest, greatest in this space, as well as best practices on all their upgrades, migrations, patches, all of that. Another one I'd suggest, keep an eye on Marcus Mikhailowicz's posts for all things high availability. Those will all be very helpful in this space. The first one I want to talk about is single server rolling patches. Rack has had rolling patches for a long time. You pull one node out of the cluster, you patch it, you put it back in the cluster and move on to the next node. Rinse and repeat until you patched all of the nodes. Well, with a single database, you didn't really have the option to do that. So starting with 23C, you get that same level of availability on standalone servers. This technique creates a second instance on a single server. You patch that and then transfer the database to the patched instance. It leverages the technology from Rack 1 nodes, so there are just a few constraints. You know, your clients must be connecting via a database service, not a SID. That's a best practice anyway. We should be doing that by now, although I know there's still some holdouts that are using SIDs. But the database must also use Oracle managed file names and have an SP file, not a P file. Once again, both of those are best practices we should have been using for a long time, but now this gives you a real good reason on why you want to do that. I guess my last comment on the topic would be, make sure you have sufficient RAM to stand up that second instance. That's one that we'll forget sometimes. Make sure it's configured so that you can use it as another SGA. Put over here to the side a high level of the steps so you can check those out. It's really pretty straightforward. Using server control to do all of the heavy lifting. You can, modify the database to enable local rolling, transfer it over to the new Oracle home, and then check to make sure it's all good. The next one is local rolling patches. So it's really sort of the same thing as the single instance rolling patches, only doing that on an individual node of a rack cluster. In the past, you would roll from node to node in your rack cluster, and so you had these repeating outages, and you had the challenge of that workload shuffling around. Well, with local rolling patches, now your workload on the first node, doing the patch on that won't interrupt the workloads on the others. And so you can walk through the nodes, doing each one of them in a local rolling fashion, same exact procedure as you use to do your single server rolling patches. The last one I want to talk about on patching is something we call 2-stage rolling patches, right? We've had rolling patches on Rack, but many of the patches continue to be non-rolling, especially a lot of the one-off patches. They fall into this category. You have to read the readmes, and it goes, sorry, this is not a rolling eligible patch. So Oracle with 23C has added a two-stage rolling technique that enables many of these previously non-rolling patches to be applied in a rolling fashion. So not all patches can take advantage of it. So once again, you do still have to check the README with the patch to make sure that it's available. But then you can use a technique whereby you apply the patches to all the instances, but they're not enabled. Then you just have one SQL command, alter system, enable rack, two-stage rolling updates all, and it turns on the updates on all of the nodes at the same time. So for my last topic, I want to talk about rack on Kubernetes. Many enterprises have been using Kubernetes to provide HA and scaling for their app tiers for a long time. An orchestration tier such as Rancher provides, kube control, which can spin up and down Kubernetes nodes as you need to support capacity demands if you're increasing capacity, as well as to restart nodes that have failed for one reason or another. So now with 23C, Oracle has embraced Kubernetes, and so we have an Oracle operator for Kubernetes. That's essentially a plug-in to kube control that allows kube control to leverage that same type of capability for databases. So it'll go in containers as well as on-prem, in the cloud. It can, create new databases, plug, unplug PDBs, delete, clone, open, close, all of these sorts of things. It also supports rack on-prem and autonomous database in the cloud. You can do Exadatas on-prem. Rack in the Kubernetes nodes themselves should be available soon if it's not already out. I don't know if either Sean or Maria know whether that one's got a release date or not, but coming real soon. I know they're working on it heavily. So giving you a handful of links over here to the right. The live labs are tremendous. They'll walk you right through it. The blog there is by the product manager who's leading this effort, and your main tree of docs out of GitHub have all the details. You can download all of this. This is all open source. So I've given you the link to the container registry where you can get all of these container images. The Helm charts are there so you can rebuild the images with any kind of tweaks that you want. They also take into account all of the open source observability frameworks like Grafana, Prometheus. Those are all very popular in this space. And then one last one I wanted to slip in as just a little lanyap, the doc ID here for support of Red Hat OpenShift, as well as Oracle Cloud Native Environment, the CNCF certified Kubernetes distros that are out there available and are supported by Oracle support. So with that, I will hand it over to the next speaker. I believe Rich is up next.
You got it. How do you make a difference in the world? Start to leverage some of these things you're seeing here. How do you make even a bigger difference with the company where they notice it? Start tuning these things so your cloud is lower and lower cost and things like that. Larry talked about Oracle being on a price performance much faster than AWS. It was over 15 times faster, but you have to leverage the things that are out there. You also want to consolidate databases, as Maria said, relational, JSON, XML, key value, graph, spatial, file IO. You could use all different databases to do this, or you could use just one and pay for that. I'm going to talk about some of the things you really can make a difference with. True cache is where you make the biggest difference with the end user. You could put it at the app tier, edge, regional, multi-cloud cache. You use it with distributed database. It's a high performance read-only memory cache that stays consistent and is automatically managed. Some of the other things, sharding, much simpler to create and manage shard replicas, used heavily in distributed databases. Maybe you need data sovereignty where you use shards for different countries. Very easy to use now in 23C. Inter-instance resource management, DBAs can now specify the priority of different databases within. So now you've got that converged database. You can also give different ones priorities. The next one, priority transactions, where people set a priority. They often call this, Oracle calls it automatic transaction rollback, because it's aborting the lower level transaction for a higher transaction. So it's going to roll back that low priority transaction, which is blocking some very important high priority transaction from obtaining a roll lock after a predefined wait time. So you set the wait time. You set if you want low and high priority transactions. By default, it's off, and it's set at the session level with an alter session. On the next slide, you'll see SQL domains. They're dictionary objects. You can do emails, social security numbers, instead of sending it to a varchar2 or a number and setting it. SQL domains are used in place of data types or alongside data types. There's 3 types: single column, multi-column, or flexible. There's also some built-in domains already out there. Email could be day of the week, the month spelled out. It could be the short of it, the short MON only for Monday. Social security numbers, credit cards, number, phone number are built in. If you get my Prepare for 23C, I have probably 10 to 20 slides just on that alone. The OKafka application now can run directly against the database, and it connects to the database using the JDBC thin driver. JavaScript in the database. Hey, how great is that for people that use JavaScript now? You could also do inline JavaScript, procedures, and JavaScript modules. And then we also have escrow locking, some people call it, but Oracle calls it lock-free value reservations. And the key word is when you're doing this, and again, in that presentation on 23C that I have a lot of examples on that. But you create a table, and then let's say you're using a checking balance and you make it a number. The keyword is reservable. So checking balance, number, reservable, constraint, minimum balance, check, balance greater than $50. Now, any reservable update on this column now is lock-free reservation. So the transactions making the updates do not lock the row, but indicate their intention to modify it. Maybe someone's going to modify it by $100. You, and maybe your wife, my wife is going to modify it by $100. I'm going to modify it by $100. Oracle keeps a reservable journal to keep track of the amount, to make sure they're keeping track of that. It's still, the balance is still above that constraint. So very, very nice. Keeps and makes the system a lot faster when you make those kind of transactions. Again, that's also in my talk. And on the next one, we'll see dual instance rolling patch, which Trey covered very well. And I just wanted to say, it's making it faster. It's making you faster. Don't forget to make yourself faster. It's like autonomous database. If you're a DBA, it's making you faster. The next one, how do I make it the developer faster? How about auto SQL repair, people call it. Oracle actually calls it real-time SQL plan management. So when a SQL error occurs, you get an Aura 600, you don't fix it. Oracle looks for another execution plan that will not create that same error. And don't forget about 19C. You know, you maybe not have seen it, but SQL quarantine will also prevent bad execution plans. Maybe they're really slow, and you can quarantine those so that they never happen. And with that, there's better errors in 23C, much more descriptive. And in Explain Plan, there's actually tuning tips, you know, what you should tune. He covered rack on Kubernetes and PDB standbys, but I was going to say 21C data guard per pluggable database comes out. So if you jumped from 19C to 23C, you might not have noticed that. And he talked about the PDB standby as well. On the next one, you'll see all the security. So why do you use Oracle? A lot of people say, well, our database is better than Oracle. You know, we use Mongo. Well, Oracle JSON, twice as fast, half the cost. Isn't that nice? But you know what? You can use an API to go there as well if you really want to use it. But look at all the security. Some people will say, well, we have transparent data connection, transparent data encryption, or we have the audit vault. I say, but do you have all of these features that I may need, or different parts of my business may need, or audit vault? 23C in database SQL firewall blocks unauthorized SQL and PL SQL injection attacks. 1024 byte database password. You want to make it really hard to break it. And Charles Kim, I know, has a presentation on 23C. It has a lot of slides on this. The last thing I want to talk about is, where we went. We started with machine learning in the 70s. They were writing the math for it. And then they had an AI winner. And then they're writing the math again, and they thought it was going to be big again in 87. And once again, there was an AI winner. Well, now the hardware is actually fast enough for it. So why did God put you here at this particular time at the biggest acceleration as we head to the machine learning part of AI, but also things like ChatGPT? GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, something actually Google wrote a paper on. It's kind of like a very impressive machine learning model for specifically language. As Maria talked about very well, that language I now can use to connect to the database and do machine learning, things like regression or clustering, look for age groups that might buy my product, look for regression, am I going to hit my sales? But instead of looking for, maybe I could just do it through the Cohere, which Oracle uses for GenAI, although they use all the other ones. But don't forget, you're the key place. I said, how do you make a difference? How do you lower the cost of the cloud? How do you become the person everybody realizes this person has really helped? You work with in-memory. It's going to be faster. Partition things. Instead of going to 1 billion rows, maybe you're only going to 200 rows at a time in specific areas. Well, security is a table stake, but not for all databases. It is for Oracle. Data guard, recoverability, failover, rack, availability, free machine learning, free Apex, auto upgrade. Talk about that in a minute. Autonomous database. Put the patch on before you want generative DBA, GenAI for a DBA. Autonomous database finds out there's an error before anybody knows it, creates a patch, puts it on, you wake up in the morning, it's already patched. And then some of the other ones, get to Exadata and Oracle Cloud if you can. Autonomous database runs on Exadata. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Charles, our great leader here at Viscosity.
Actually, Rich, before you do, one quick thing.
Sure.
Do you have the link to the talk that you referred to multiple times, your 23C talk? Folks are asking for it.
If they just ask anybody at Viscosity, they can do it, or Rich Niemiec at gmail.com, if you can spell Rich Niemiec.
And I have another answer to that too. Last year, we actually acquired a company called Orapub, and we actually go out of our way to take all of the sessions that are done by our speakers at Viscosity, and we load all of them to Orapub, which includes PowerPoint slides as well as actual webinar recordings. And so to join Orapub is free for everyone. So we welcome everyone to join Orapub and view and look at all these presentations that we do as a company.
Great. Forgot about that. Thanks. Back to you, Charles.
All right. So I'm going to talk about upgrading to 23C. And so how do we get there? Hopefully everyone is already on 19C and also already on pluggable databases. Unfortunately, quite a bit of our customers, especially the large enterprise customers, as we helped them upgrade to 19C, quite a bit of them did not migrate to pluggables along the way, mainly because of time constraints more than anything else. And so what I want to do is share with you some of the areas that you need to look for as you go from 11G to even all the way up to 23C. So if you're on an older release like 11G, 12C, release 1, 12C, release 2, 18C, there is no direct path to go to 23C. You must inevitably go to 19C first and do a double upgrade to 23C. You'll also see that there is an option to go to 21C, but because 19C is a long-term release, so if you're on an older release, we strongly recommend that you do a hop to 19C and then upgrade to 23C. Another thing that I want to mention as we talk about upgrading, Oracle did announce that DBUA and the command line options are going to be deprecated. And so as you will see in another slide, that Oracle announces deprecation, then soon after in the subsequent releases, they announce the support of those capabilities. And so again, like I mentioned before, if you're on an older release, 11.204, 12.102, 12.2, or 18C, you must upgrade to 19C or 21C and upgrade to 23C. But what if you are on 11.203? You must first go to 11.204 before you can go to 19C and 23C. During the pandemic, Viscosity did, oh my gosh, hundreds of upgrades and hundreds of Exadata upgrades as well. And a lot of our customers were not on the latest PSUs of 11.2 and 12.1. So prior to the upgrades to 19C, we had to update the PSU to a version that they can actually go and do the upgrades. And so those are other things that you need to be considerate of as well. Another big thing with some of our larger customers and some of our customers who have a lot of performance problems, they chose to keep their compatible. Even though we upgraded their databases to 19C, they chose to keep their compatible to either 12.1 or 11.2. As you can see, the minimal value for compatible to 23C is 19. And so with some of our customers, as they go from 19C to 23C, and if they haven't done the pluggables, they're going to face several challenges. One is going to be setting the compatible to 19C or even to 23C. The other one's going to be potentially even going from non-pluggable to pluggable multi-tenant architecture, and then obviously dealing with the actual upgrade and performance tuning. There's numerous ways to upgrade to 23C. If you want to avoid the double upgrade from older releases, you can actually do a data pump export import and migrate directly from the older versions that you see all the way up to 23C. Like I mentioned before, auto upgrade is the preferred method of upgrades. And in fact, as Oracle announced, DBUA and command line will be deprecated in the future, we strongly recommend that you go with auto upgrade. And so even with auto upgrade, you must go to 19C or 21C before you can hop to 23C. Transportable table space is another popular method that we've been leveraging, especially as we migrate and replatform customers, but also at the same time, you can use transportable table space to eliminate the double hop upgrade as well. Obviously, leveraging SQL-based replication, such as Golden Gate and SharePlex, we can actually replicate and upgrade and do a zero downtime upgrades from an older release to 23C as well. So basic concept would be we take a backup of, for example, 11.204, restore onto another server or even on the same server if you have the space and capacity. After you do the restore, you, based on SCN, start to apply on the target. So basically, you would take the 11.204, upgrade it all the way to 19C, then upgrade again to 23C. And then based on the SCN, when you did the backup, you start pushing the Golden Gate trail files or the SharePlex data files and roll forward with SQL apply and keep the database in sync, and then take a minor outage. We actually don't use the word outage when we talk about SharePlex or Golden Gate. We actually call it quiescing. You quiesce the system, and then you actually cut over to the 23C environment. Another bit popular, it's getting more popular now, is to be able to use Data Guard. And transient standby was introduced in 11GR1, but with Active Data Guard, Oracle has put in a lot of capabilities with DBMS rolling, and you can do zero downtime or near zero downtime upgrades using Data Guard. Right, this is the last slide, but the traditional auditing is desupported in 23C. The announcement for deprecation was announced in 21. And so for customers who need to move, look at MetaLink note 2909718.1 to be able to convert the traditional auditing scripts to unified auditing. With 23C, we can now audit individual columns as well as individual columns for tables and views. And so the whole idea is now to be able to create policies and be able to eliminate a lot of the noise in the audit trail files. And then one last thing I do want to mention is that as Oracle releases newer versions of the database, they actually embed newer security features and newer audit options. And so, for example, with customers who are upgrading from 11G, these new security audit options are not applied as part of the actual upgrade. So we recommend that you look at these security features after the upgrade and apply them. And then lastly, from a security perspective, routinely run DB security assessment tool in your database after each upgrade.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Charles. Keep getting y'all's questions in here. And panelists, were there any questions asked that you guys typed out answers to that you think are great to address to the audience live?
Interestingly enough, patching seems to be the question we're getting most.
We have lots of choices in patching these days. Yeah. Roy and Mike are working overtime, I'm sure, to be bringing out all these capabilities. It's gotten a lot better. It really has. So, a lot smoother the last few that I've done.
And there's also a lot of enhancements in partitioning as well. Oracle enhanced, especially in the cloud, when it comes to being able to use partitioning from object storage and to be able to store cold data out there.
I was going to say in the poll, sometimes the audience wants to know how it turned out. 88% were on 19C, a couple percent on 23C, 3% on 21C. Still some people on 12C. You can call us and get some aces to be your helpers. You know, what do you do when you're climbing Mount Everest? Well, hopefully you have a Sherpa, or don't climb Mount Everest, but have some Sherpas take you through that. I think there's a lot on this call that can help, and read some of the blogs at Oracle, some of the videos they have as well. They have a lot of them.
Yeah, and there will be even more. I know our upgrade team are already doing them, workshops and events through the user groups. So if you are looking to get more details about upgrading and patching and stuff like that, keep an eye on your local user group. Roy Swanger and Mike Dietrich and all the folks that are involved in our upgrade team, they do phenomenal one-day workshops through the user groups. These are typically free events. And they give a huge amount of insight into what you need to bear in mind and how to do it easily and safely. If you don't see one in your user group, reach out to your user group. Ask them to put on an upgrade or patching workshop for you. I'm sure they'd be more than happy to do it.
Yeah, also on that same topic, James asked a question there about single server rolling patch using a new Oracle home. If I'm doing that for OEM's Oracle home's embedded in there in a lot of places. How do I deal with that? Well, if you look in that doc link that I included, you'll see that with single server rolling patches, they actually show a technique where you do an out of place to the new Oracle home and then roll it back to your original Oracle home. So you end up with a two-step process, but you end up back in your original Oracle home. And so now then your OEM will be none the wiser.
Yeah, I saw a question about the optimizer in asking a generic question about what types of enhancements do we have for the optimizer in 23C. And I think the best answer, I mean, without having slides and everything else, is to go back to Maria's opening slides about 23C and about our direction that we're taking, our roadmap with the database. You're going to see more and more implementation of AI and automation, or autonomous style automation, and leveraging machine learning. So we're actually using our own tools to solve problems such as optimization, right? So with real-time statistics collection in 23C, we're now using machine learning to detect a pattern or a trend in the evolution or the changing of an object size, right? Rather than having statistics being collected as high watermarks are changing and after DML operations, we're taking it to that next step. And you're going to see those types of evolutions or those types of innovations take place as we keep innovating with 23C. So sorry, Rich, you were going to say something as well.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, somebody had some upgrading questions, but he said not applicable to us that have already stood up 23C and are loving it. So just to let you know, somebody really loves it out there. That's good to know as well. I know there's a question on cover how to convert PDBs after upgrade. I know we have done some presentations on that, and we could certainly help with that as well for Edward.
Yeah, I actually do a separate pluggable database 1-hour presentation too that we can actually share. But from a conversion, it's no different than what you would be doing in an older version. You know, creating an XML manifest and then unplugging and plugging in kind of a thing. That's one option. The other option is now Oracle has built in so many capabilities to do a lot of the migrations hot. And so it's almost like cloning a database to a PDB. But the age-old challenge that we used to always have is that as we upgraded customers, especially the customers that are like hundreds of terabytes, when we upgrade them from, especially on Exadata, on ASM, it becomes I can go and migrate them to PDBs, but on ASM storage itself, at least in 19C, we had to keep the original OMF data file names. Because if you look at from a PDB perspective, it's, from an ASM data disk group, it's plus data plus SID plus data / SID / data file. Well, when you deal with the container side, it's plus data plus data / container / PDB / data file. And so you're missing that extra directory in between. But for large databases, you don't have the capability to do an RMM backup restore back. Small databases will just clone it back and just create a pluggable from as a copy. But the larger ones, the customers are stuck with that. So, but I have heard in 23C that they're working on something for that as well.
So any last thoughts from our speakers?
I like the fact that 30% of the people are looking to upgrade 23C within this year, and about the same next year as well. So you'll see a lot of 23C presentations at those user groups from you guys, I hope.
And we need to talk to those of you who hit 12C.
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. I'm going to close it out here with just a couple slides about AuraPub. Charles mentioned we will post everything there. I actually might put this one on YouTube as well because it is just something you're probably going to want to access more quickly. But I will check with everything with our speakers as well before I get them all published. But if you haven't already, head over to www.aurapub.com for a free membership. There are paid tiers, but you do get a lot of free information with just the free membership. So I highly recommend that. It is recordings side by side with the slide decks for anybody who agrees to speak with us and agrees to let us share their documentation. So thank you guys again. I love this webinar we have each year. Maria has been on this webinar with us a couple years now, which has been very special for us. Sean, hopefully we'll have you back as well. Thank you again, Rich, Charles, Troy. It's always great to hear from you guys. And otherwise, have a great weekend, everyone. Happy New Year. And if you're not on 23C, let's get you there.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.